No, I legit have goosebumps. I legit have the shivers right now. I cannot wait to see this. It's coming out February 16th. My next guest, we're such an honor to have the director of this new Apple TV Plus series, The Dynasty New England Patriots. It's a 10-parter. It premieres this Friday. Matthew Hamachek, congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much, and thanks for having me on.
How did you bite this apple? It's like you could have gone a million different ways, and I'm sure it was quite a journey to get to where you wanted to go and the story you wanted to tell.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I didn't grow up a Patriots fan at all. I actually, have family that grew up near Green Bay, Wisconsin, and so grew up a diehard Packers fan. By the way, your interview with Jordan Love at the Super Bowl was amazing.
Thank you.
So I didn't really know that much about the team, and what that afforded me is the ability to listen, because the thing that was so unique about the thing we had with this project was we had access to 70 plus players, coaches, executives, league officials, rivals, like Strahan in the 07 and 11 Super Bowls. And so it was really just listening and letting them tell their stories. And the other thing was we had 35,000 hours of never before seen archival footage. So we're in the locker room with Belichick when he's addressing the team about Spygate. It really was a process of just like listening to those people, getting those interviews, and then pairing it with that footage and just sort of making an incredible story.
How do you whittle that down? How do you tackle that and create a 10-episode docuseries? That sounds really challenging.
Well, I mean, as we got to talk to these guys, the through line that we kept hearing was about the way this thing started and the way that it ended. So it starts as this great story about these three outsiders: Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, who, at the time wasn't a billionaire owner. He wasn't part of that, club of people who could just write a check and get a team. He's an outsider. He has to leverage everything to get the team. Belichick, as Jackie Mack, the great journalist, puts it in the series, had a fairly underwhelming stint as a head coach in Cleveland prior to coming to the Patriots as the head coach. And then Tom, everybody knows the story, the 199th pick. So it's these three outsiders that start out, and they create this culture of selflessness and sort of putting aside the messiness of being human, things like ego, all that kind of stuff. And by the end, all those things that they had kept at bay for so long sort of started creeping in, and we detail, everything that led to the unraveling of the dynasty.
So I imagine it's in 3 parts, right? Like it's how it's created, how, living through it. And, you're saying they weren't messy. There was some messiness there that I'm excited to get into and sort of see. And then I don't know if it's the fall or just the end of it. Which part of those 3 or which phase captivated you the most?
It's interesting. I almost from the outset, when I started talking to these people, the thing that interested me most was the period in the middle, right? And so what I mean by that is they do the unthinkable. They go from sort of the underdog of the NFL. They win 1, then they win 3 and 4 years total. And it's the next part that really fascinated me, because that's when you get to the 07 season. And that starts out with, Mangini and the Jets, in a lot of ways, according to some of the people we talked about, ratting out Belichick and the Patriots to the NFL. The Spygate scandal happens. And then all of a sudden we're inside this locker room. We're watching Belichick address the team. And then they go on this run, right, where they go undefeated. And it was interesting. One of our editors was talking about this. He's a huge Patriots fan. And he was saying that some of this footage, it was like watching the evil empire on the Death Star going from planet to planet, destroying everybody in their path, except instead of doing it in this sort of solemn Darth Vader-y way, we're watching this party as it goes, as they're doing it. And then they reach the final moment. They're going up against the Giants in the Super Bowl. And it's this incredibly humbling moment. One of the people we talked about in the locker room after that was over, you could hear people crying and people were throwing up because it was such a devastating loss for them. And then the next game they play, Tom Brady goes down. he has to face mortality for the first time in his life because he's out for the season with his knee injury. And that sets up this tension for him and for the sort of rest of the run, because he realizes that the show goes on without him if he's out. And it's how does he stay there, despite what a lot of people say Belichick wanted, which was to move on, and Tom being determined to play until he was 45. And so there's this inherent tension in all of it. And we detail Spygate, Deflategate, the Aaron Hernandez story, and things like the Malcolm Butler benching as well.
I mean, the human part of it is what interests me. Like, there's the game. I mean, and how did you get this incredible access? First of all, that's crazy.
It's the same way you do with every documentary, right? I did the Tiger Woods documentary for HBO, was my previous thing that I worked on. And, here we had incredible access. There, we had barely anybody inside Tiger's inner circle, but the process is the same. You go to these people and you ask them and you say, hey, this is the story that I think I might want to tell. I don't really know that much. And, here's how it could play out. Some people are really interested in doing it right away, and some people take, a year plus to agree to do it. I think you're right, though. One of the things that I've said to all of these people is, I'm not as much interested in the X's and O's. I'm not as interested in, wins and losses. It's about the people and the characters and telling an honest and fair, unvarnished story of the New England Patriots.
And, we're just seeing the shot of Mr. Robert Kraft there, someone who I had a very small glimpse into this dynasty when I was living up there and covering the team. And I've always found him to be a very compelling human, and I have a lot of respect for him. And I have thought about him often when it has come to these moments of adversity, whether it's Deflategate, whether it's all those things, of course, but also in just his decision-making, because he is someone who strikes me as a person who's very full of humanity, full of he cares about relationships above everything else. And he's faced with at some point walking away from Tom Brady to keep Belichick happy, then eventually having this crazy tough conversation with Bill Belichick as well. What did you learn from that dynamic? And from Kraft's perspective, are we going to get to see some of the thought process behind those tough decisions?
Yeah, the entire last, I'd say, 3 episodes, 8, 9, and 10, but in particular 10 from Robert's perspective, you really get to go inside his head and grapple with, okay, so in the Eagles Super Bowl, Bill made, what he sort of describes as an error in his mind of not putting team first, not putting Malcolm in, despite whatever the reason was, which we go into a little bit of detail on. And, thinking, okay, I'm going to keep an eye on this guy and see, what's going to happen here. And then you see him as he witnesses what Bill pulls off against the Rams in the next year, where, he takes arguably one of the best offenses of all time, one of the great sort of like wonderkids of the NFL in Sean McVay. And when you listen to McCourty and a bunch of the guys talk about what Bill put together defensively with his staff to win that championship, it really gives you insight into the decisions that Robert was making at the time. But I think ultimately what you realize is that this is a guy who wanted to hang on to everybody and didn't want to have to make that choice. And I think it really was his goal and his hope that he would be able to keep them together. And I think the other thing you really realize as you watch this thing unfold is how much he did to try to keep that going along the way.
It's so interesting to think about that whole season, the defense sort of leading the way, similarly to the Chiefs this year, and then having it maybe made the decision. It had to have factored into the decision of parting ways with Tom Brady. It was the most boring Super Bowl ever. I was there. There was like one Gronk catch. So that the defense certainly led the way that year. I love that you're sitting down with so many people from this world. And I have to ask you about Bill's former football research director, Ernie Adams, because this is listen. Matthew, no one had access to this guy. They hid him in a film room under the stadium for 20 years, if you ask me, but he was such a pivotal part of the Dynasty success. And you got to sit down with him. What was revealed about this part of the Dynasty through the eyes of Ernie Adams?
All right, first off, I'll give you a little thing about Ernie. So at some point in time after this comes out, a network is going to realize that they need to get Ernie Adams doing analysis of football every Sunday, and whoever figures that out first is going to be very lucky.
Cool.
So Ernie was one of the first people I reached out to, actually, because I think I had read an article when I started doing research about him. And like you said, he's sort of this mystical figure within New England that nobody ever gets access to and nobody ever really gets to talk to. And I called him up and I started to talk to him. And what I found was one of the most charismatic, interesting people. And to be honest, he gave me 15 hours of interviews over the course of the 2 years that we were making this thing. And I think what was important to me early on was to find people that could give Bill Belichick's perspective, because we've all watched the Bill Belichick press conferences, you know, the "we're on to Cincinnati" type of thing. And so I wanted somebody who could really be Bill's voice, but also come at things with a historical perspective. Because if you think Bill loves the game of football and knows all sorts of interesting facts and things, Ernie Adams is one level higher. And they're lifelong friends. They went to Andover High School together. And so getting to talk to Ernie, getting to talk to Scott Pioli, who I know is in the media, but also really hasn't gone on the record all that much about all the decisions that were made, why they moved on from Drew Bledsoe, why they did certain things. So all of these people, just getting to talk to them was fascinating for me. And you know, just getting to put this whole thing together.
I can't wait to see this. And it starts on Friday. Did Ernie give up any of the secrets?
Well, no, actually, in episode 4, you actually get to see me asking him about Spygate for the first time. And one of my favorite lines from Ernie, he says, "There's certain things I'll be taking to the grave with me." And I love that. Ooh. But no, you learn quite a bit. And I think what he does a really good job of is, if anybody, you know, covered New England, they'll remember when Alex Guerrero had his sort of sideline and privileges revoked at one point. I think it was in the 17 year when they were on the road to the Eagles Super Bowl, which they lost. You know, one of the things that Ernie did really well was always sort of explain, okay, in these situations, here's why these decisions were made. And, you know, he talked about how, you know, these guys can go and see somebody like Alex outside of the building whenever they want to, but you can't have somebody inside the building going against the strength and conditioning staff of the New England Patriots. And so I think he does a really great job of helping the audience and me, as I was asking these questions, understand the world through Bill Belichick's eyes. And Bill was also really insightful and gave incredible interviews about calling up Randy Moss for the first time. And Randy's in a club someplace, I think in Houston. and Randy's convinced that there's this person on the other end of the line doing a really bad Bill Belichick impression and trying to say that they've traded for him and that he needs to get to New England the next morning. And Randy hangs up on Bill, like, you know, 5 or 6 times. And finally, Bill just says, "Look, you got to get up here. If you're not up here by tomorrow morning, there's no trade."
It's over.
You know, and Randy just realizing, "Oh my goodness, I just hung up on Bill." So it's a great story.
I can't wait. Now, you mentioned Bill. I'd like to know, and by the way, a lot of people would say that Ernie Adams retiring in 2021 was sort of the fall of everything and the leading to the end of things with Bill. You're in there clocking hours with Bill Belichick. What is the vibe? And when did you know it was done with him in New England? And how was that?
I don't think there was a specific time when I knew anything was done, but I will say this. I think that when you watch this series, you'll have a much better understanding of, how can I put this? You'll see the breadcrumbs that are laid by the people that were in these rooms talking about why things happened. You'll understand why things are the way they are in New England right now. I don't think it will be as surprising to people once they watch this series. And as far as the vibe with Bill, you know, look, a lot of it is very similar to sometimes what you see in the press conferences. But when he wants to talk about something and he really enjoys a subject, he opens up, and we've all seen that on you know, the NFL 100. We've seen it when he was doing Scarnecchia's retirement or Hall of Fame induction for the Patriots. There are these moments where he switches, and all of a sudden you get this incredibly charismatic guy, and we got a bunch of those. And, you know, this is one of the greatest coaches, if not the greatest coach in NFL history. And just to be able to sit across from him and ask him questions was a huge honor for me.
The greatest coach in NFL history is not working this year.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, don't forget when Tom left, right, there was a couple people like Shanahan in San Francisco reportedly, and also Gruden reportedly, you know, at the time, who passed on him as well. I think there's recency bias, and maybe, you know, people are thinking more about the last 4 years or the last 3 years than the totality of his career. So I'm guessing that, you know, sometime next year there will be something huge opening up for him.
Matthew, where do you? I mean, I assume there's heavy tones of, was it Brady or Bill that made the dynasty successful in exploring that bite from Danny Amendola? We worked for Bill, but we played for Tom is an incredible bite. Where do you come out on that argument?
So I know you've spent some time with Scott Pioli, so I'm going to quote Scott Pioli in the movie when I asked him this question. I thought it was a great answer. He said, you know, he said that it's almost an insulting question. I asked him it, and he said because it ignores the hundreds, if not thousands, of people who came through that building, on the coaching staff, people like Ernie, people like Scott, but all the players, and we have a ton of them in the thing that contributed to this thing, because it was, as you know, football is the ultimate team sport. So yes, obviously Robert, Bill, and Tom are the pillars of this thing, but there's so many other people that contributed. And I think that when you watch the series, I think that's one of the main takeaways from it.
A very Scott Pioli front office answer that you appropriated,
there we go.
But I'll allow it, and I think people can come to their own conclusions with this insight that you're providing in the dynasty. Now, dynasty is being thrown around right now big time. We got the Chiefs doing their parade thing in Kansas City. As you watch that, maybe more from the outside, of course, you spent so many years researching everything going on with the Patriots. Any similarities there, and what did you learn, Matthew, about what it takes to sustain a dynasty?
I think I mean, look, it's incredibly difficult to create it in the first place. This goes back to this idea of the culture that you create within a team of team first and selflessness. And, you know, it's nearly impossible to create something like that once for one Super Bowl. You know, 3 and 4 years for the Patriots. I might be wrong about this, but 3 and 5 years for the Chiefs right now. I think the question is, how much longer can you sustain something like that? But there are so many similarities. All the guys I talked to, some of them I was texting on Sunday, while the former players that I was texting with on Sunday, they all point to Mahomes and that sort of cool, collected, calm under pressure type of mentality, and just sort of how much him and Tom seem to both have that. And, you know, you take an incredible coach in Andy Reid, you take an incredible quarterback in Mahomes, you don't know what can happen. And they have an opportunity right now to do the thing that the Patriots never could, which is the three-peat. And so we'll see.
MJ vibes with young Mahomes there. And it's an interesting through line. Like you obviously you did the Tiger doc. Did you notice something about Tom that made you think like Tiger was just like this?
They're very dissimilar in a lot of ways, but, you know, because of everything that Tiger went through, the work ethic is the through line. That's the thing. It's the person who's willing to wake up, and no matter how many majors you've won, no matter how many Super Bowls you've won, you're out there. These two guys were out there tweaking the tiniest of little things, even when they were the best of the best of the best at their respective sports. They were always trying to get better, and they were never satisfied. And they always had that internal drive to just to I don't know, be better. And I think that's the real through line between the two of them.
All right, Matthew, we appreciate it so much. We hope Jordan Love, you'll be you know, in 20 years doing another dynasty. Hopefully he can do something and bring another Lombardi back to Titletown.
Can't wait.
We appreciate you. Everybody, I cannot wait. I'm like, this is appointment viewing for me. 10-part documentary series, The Dynasty New England Patriots, this Friday, February 16th on Apple TV+.